Okay, so I'd just briefly like to go into the agenda. So I'll give a brief introduction to GLOBIS, explain who we are and who is hosting this event. And then we'll have our speech by Mr. Chad Eudy. And then we'll have a dialogue between Mr. Eudy and Nakamura-san. Then finally, we'll have a talk about our GLOBIS programs. There will be some time for Q&A as well as after our dialogue and at the very end. So this event is sponsored by GLOBIS USA. At GLOBIS USA, we equip our clients and students with practical business skills, offering access to a vast global network passionate about making an impact. So at GLOBIS USA, we are bridging the Pacific. So as you can see, GLOBIS has a main campus in Tokyo, a number of hub campuses in various cities in Japan. We also have a hub campus in Singapore, Bangkok, an office in China. In San Francisco, we just launched in 2021. And our latest campus is Brussels. It's GLOBIS Europe. So our mission at GLOBIS is to support entrepreneurs to make an impact on society through an ecosystem of people, capital, and knowledge. So the man in the background of this photo is Mr. Yoshito Hori. He is our founder and CEO. So he actually graduated from Harvard with his MBA just over 30 years ago in 1992. And he realized that there was a real demand in Japan for MBA programs. So he came back and started GLOBIS very small with a single marketing course filled with 20 students. And we're very proud to say, despite our humble roots, Japan is now GLOBIS is now Japan's #1 MBA program with a total of 40% of the market share. So as of June 2021, at GLOBIS, we have welcomed a total of 9,500 students. They come from 68 different nationalities. We have 10 campuses in 5 countries, and we work with 144 corporate partners. So these are actually partners for our full-time program, which I'll talk about a little bit at the very end. But this is an opportunity to do internships if you study with us at the full-time program in Tokyo. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Chad Eudy.
Thank you, Ashley. I am super excited. Let me get my screen up here so everybody can see. Can you see, Ashley, the screen? Awesome. First of all, I just want to thank Tomoya. You know, there's moments in your life when you have that divine appointment with someone and you cross paths and you know it was something that was just a divine, that divine appointment. And me and Tomoya met in Salt Lake City back in 21, I believe it was, and we had dinner together. And I just started sharing my heart with him. I started sharing what we here at FHI, and by the way, I'm the Senior Vice President of Leadership Development at FHI, Freight Handlers Incorporated. We're based out of North Carolina, but work all across the US. We're a labor solutions company, and we love serving people and organizations. But I met Tomoya in Salt Lake City, and I just shared my heart with him. And I talked about servant leadership. It's a passion of mine. It's something that we teach at our organization at FHI, something that we try to model here at FHI. And so I just began to talk to him, and he said, you know, I would love at some point for maybe you to come and speak to our MBA students. And I said, I would love to be able to serve you. And so we're here today after about 2 years of being apart since I met and talked to him last. And I am so excited. I thank you all. Some of you are joining us later in the evening than others. So I really appreciate you joining the call. And hopefully I'll be able to add value to your day with some of the things I share with you. So I'm very passionate about this topic of servant leadership. And Tomoya asked me to kind of speak on how servant leadership makes life more meaningful. So let me start out by asking a question, and I would have you put your answer in the chat box there, and we'll be able to monitor that. But answer this question for me. I am most fulfilled when? I am most fulfilled when? Just put your answers there in the chat box. I'd love to see what your answers may be. I am most fulfilled when? Oh, I love it. Serving others. I do meaningful work. Taking care of others, helping other people. When I walk in purpose. Optimizing, when mine and others' potential are optimized. Teaching the MBA program. Thank you, Joe. I live in purpose. That's awesome. Putting value in others. Great stuff. Loving others. This is good. You know what I didn't hear or I don't see in the chat box? I didn't see anyone say, I loved hurting people's feelings. I didn't see anybody say, I just get excited when I gossip about others at work. I get excited when I take advantage of someone to make me look better. I don't see that anywhere in there, Tomoya. I don't think you see it. I think you're monitoring it closer than I am, but I don't see that. I see people wanting to live life on purpose. You're talking about working, serving other people. And so what I wanted to share with you, life is more meaningful when we are engaged in things that make us and others happy. And I am most fulfilled, and I found my life to be most fulfilled when I'm serving first and foremost my family. This is my beautiful family, my wife of 26 years, Ashley. My son, Josh, is 18, getting ready to go off to university, to college, and my daughter is in her second semester of nursing school, Aubrey. They are the first ones I need. If I'm going to serve others, I need to start serving in my home first, right? I believe the home has been hijacked. And I believe that we as people need to first start there. And I thought, I was doing well serving my wife, and then it took it to another level. And I'm just going to share some really personal stories because I think stories connect us to the topic that we're talking about this evening. I've been married 26 years, so about 13 years into my marriage, my wife was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And with that autoimmune disease, her ability to be able to be mobile began to deteriorate. And you talk about having to ratchet up your level of serving. I had to do that. But I understood the importance that I was modeling to my children, because one day they're going to want to, have a spouse or significant other. And I want them to understand that their fathers served their mother well. And I think we need fathers serving in the home, mothers, grandmothers, whatever role you serve in the home. I think that's important. So I love serving my family. I get meaning out of it. I get fulfillment out of it. I love serving my city. I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina. I love serving in my local church, because I believe if you're going to serve in the home, the next place you ought to serve is in the local community you've been placed in. And so I love serving in my community here in Charleston. I love serving in the local church that I attend. I love serving at FHI. I love serving the people that I've been entrusted to serve at my organization. And I love these pictures because in the first two pictures on the right-hand side, these are associates that I had the honor of hiring that are still with our organization 20 plus years into their career. Now, you would say that is almost unheard of today, right? But I understood early on that if I serve the people, they're going to want to come to work for me. They're going to want to do good. They're going to want to step up and make sure that they are serving others well. I also would like to share about our organization in the bottom right-hand corner. So we teach servant leadership, but if we don't model it at an executive level, we're failing our people. We're hypocritical, right? So in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see I'm standing in front of our executive team. So our CEO and COO had scheduled a day. So we're talking about servant leadership. How are we doing? What are we doing to serve our people, our customers, those that we've been entrusted to serve? And so we, for a half a day, was in a session, and then nobody knew but myself and about 2 other people. We went to the Durham Rescue Mission. We partnered with a nonprofit, Samaritan's Feet, and the Durham Rescue Mission, they take in homeless men and people that are living on the street that are addicted to drugs, and they try to get them on a path where they educate them, feed them, clothe them, get them back to the place where they can be provide meaning and purpose in the communities that they live in. But one of the things that Samaritan's Feet does, as the nonprofit that we're working with, you'll see the shirt on me there, is they provide socks and shoes to less fortunate people, schools. They go around the world. But on this occasion, when we went to Durham Rescue Mission, we were able to provide the men, we've served the men, but one of the things we did before we gave them a new pair of socks and shoes with Samaritan's Feet, we washed their feet. Now you talk about a humbling experience. We washed these men's feet, and I can't even explain to you how important and how meaningful that was. These men were trying to get their lives back together, and we were able to serve them by washing their feet. It was one of the most meaningful days in my career here at FHI, and I've been with FHI for 28 years now. And it was just the most meaningful opportunity to serve others. And it was so exciting. And then I like also when I served my country. So I had the opportunity to serve in the US Navy, and it was some of the most meaningful years of my life serving in our military. I served during 1990 to 94 during the first Persian Gulf War. And I just found such meaning. I learned a lot about servant leadership in the military, and I learned some things that I didn't want to do as far as rank and order was concerned with the military. So I love my time in the military and serving my country. And then one of the things I love the most is I get to go on missions trips around the world, serving the less fortunate. In these pictures here, I'm in Kenya, and we are serving here in Kenya the local orphanage. There's orphans and widows that we go serve, and giving them a bowl of rice and soup, playing with them. You can see the little girl there in the top right, how excited she was. I wasn't doing anything but showing her attention, giving her a little love. And we've been able to build houses in Africa and Kenya. We've been able to serve the less fortunate there. But I love serving to people that they can't give me anything back in return. I believe that's a true servant leader. When you're able to reach out and serve others that can't do anything for you in return, I just really, that fulfills me. That fills me up. And as I began my career at FHI, and I was given my first leadership role, I began to think about some of the key influencers in my life, in certain seasons of my life, those who had left such an impression upon me that I wanted my leadership style to model their leadership style. And the first person, this is not everybody, these are a few, but the first person was my elementary school principal. And you probably have leaders in your life that you can go back and look upon and say, these people had a profound impact upon my life. Jack Walters, my elementary school principal, he would walk the halls, loving on us, taking time to talk to us, that we were such influential kids, but he would take the time to talk to us. And even when we needed correcting, he did it in a way that wasn't demoralizing, but very respectful, where you didn't want to disappoint him and mess up again while you was in school. Jack Walters was a mentor that I have tried to model my leadership around. The second one is my chief petty officer in the Navy, Tony Davis. Now, unlike most officers in the military, he didn't demand respect because of his title and his rank, but he earned it through always taking time to listen to me. When I was a struggling 18-year-old that just left home, that was on his 7th month in the Persian Gulf, in the Persian Gulf War, I was lost. I was missing my family, but he would put his arm around me. He would say, Chad, you're going to do great things. You got such potential. He would get down. He would help me when I was in a position of, I didn't know what to do, but he was always there for me. He always provided guidance, and he helped me when I was struggling. A lot of times in the military, that's not what you see, because it's a lot of the rank and order, and you get that. It's not much of the servant leadership mentality many times, but he was a true servant leader to me, and I loved him. And then the third one is, it would be FHI's founder, one of my mentors, Chuck Wall, who always believed in me, challenged me, held me accountable, and took a chance to entrust a young 21-year-old with the people and the key business accounts. He had worked hard to earn their trust. And I thank these three leaders because they had such an influence upon my life. You know what these leaders had? They had influence. The best one-word definition that I've ever heard of leadership by John Maxwell is leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. That can be good and that can be bad. But leadership is influence. And here's what I've found. Who you are, what you are, and where you are today is because you were under the influence of certain people. Some of those people you wish didn't have influence in your life as you look back on that. But I think about my school principal, my elementary school principal, Jack Walters, my senior chief petty officer in the Navy, Tony Davis, Chuck Wall. They had such a profound influence and impact in my life. Then I began reading about and studying different leaders, because I really started, I want to be a servant leader. I want to be someone that serves. So I started reading about and studying different leaders that had a profound impact on the world. Think about Mother Teresa, who founded Missionaries of Charity. She looked after some of the poorest of the poor. She had a purpose. She found a mission, and she gave her life to it. I think about Dr. Martin Luther King, the leader of the civil rights movement. He saw something that wasn't right and wanted to change it. I think about Princess Diana, and I share Princess Diana because one of her legacies is the anti-mine legacy, where after Angolia's 2-decade civil war, there were these landmines still left in Angola, and these kids and people were free, and they were running around the country, and they were stepping on these landmines. So she, as a leader, as a servant leader, she didn't sit in England in the palace and say, hey, we need to go get all these landmines out of the fields in Angola so these kids aren't blowing their legs off. No, she went there. She was present. She was with the people. She didn't just sit in the palace in England and say, you go get the landmines up. She went there. And I think about these people, and I found out these leaders had some qualities that I believe all servant leaders possess. They are selfless. They're motivated by a desire and a passion to serve others. Unconditionally, unselfishly. I think about Mother Teresa. I think about my elementary school principal, Jack Walters. They were selfless. Jack Walters is the principal. He didn't have to come out there and love on us, talk to us, spend time with us. Mother Teresa, she went to the poorest, Calcutta, the poorest of the poor. Servant leaders are self-aware. They share the common interests and goals of others. They make people feel wanted and cared for. They're secure. They possess a security that allows them to serve others. They know their position, and they don't feel a need to flaunt it, but they're faithful to it. They're conscious of people, not position. And they're there to give and hope. They're there to give security and encouragement. They weren't just any leaders. I call these servant leaders. And I believe a good definition of a servant leader is one that leverages their leadership for those they have been entrusted to serve, and not for their own sake. It's not just about them. Servant leadership is not about what you will gain, but what you will give. Servant leadership is not about what you'll gain, but what you'll give. Chuck Wall always said, Chad, you give people what they want, you'll get what you want. And what was he talking about? Love, care, respect, honor, a voice, right? He said, you give people what they want, you're going to get what you want. But this is how they chose to lead. The problem today, I believe, is the lesson on leadership that's most taught in our universities, business schools, and 99% of the books that are written on leadership teach what I call this top-down conventional leadership model. The focus with this model is all about titles, profits, promotions, how many people as I climb this ladder can serve me. It's self-serving. It's all about how high I go, the more people I have serving me. But what is not taught or written about as much, but I believe, and what I have found to be more meaningful, and what we teach at FHI also, and more fulfilling, is the unconditional servant leadership model. Now you'll notice that that model is inverted, right? Because the focus on this servant leader, the unconventional servant leadership model, is all about people, relationships, significance. It's all about how many people do I get to serve, not how many people can serve me. So the conventional model is all about leading with your head. The unconventional servant leadership model is all about leading with your heart. There's a difference, right? You've got to be educated. You've got to be able to make decisions. Those are all good things. So I'm not saying that you don't need to have a good head on your shoulders. You don't need to have an education. What I'm saying is this conventional leadership model, what I've found is that the qualities, a lot of times when I read about and see people that were all about titles, all about profits, all about promotions, the qualities were a little different than that I saw of servant leaders. And what I would typically see with the leadership model, the conventional leadership model, is that they were self-centered. You've probably worked for one. You probably know some. But the leaders that I see that model this conventional leadership model, it's all about them. It's how many people can I have serving me? They're self-centered. They're more concerned with self and miss the opportunity to serve others. They're insecure many times. They abuse rather than use their position for the greater good of others. And then they're power abusers. You know, because if you have influence, you have power. You have the power and the ability to affect how someone thinks, acts, and develops. So they have power. They're power abusers. They're more concerned with making a dollar than they are making a difference. These are conventional leaders. It's all about the title. It's all about promotion. It's all about profits. And I began to read and see where servant leadership is. They understand they're serving human beings, not human doings. They're serving human beings. And that's how servant leadership is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be about titles. And I began to read about and see people that I knew who worked for these conventional leaders leave work broken, mentally stressed out, and even I've witnessed families who were torn apart because of a self-centered, insecure leader who abused their power instead of using their position for the greater good. They were all about themselves. I know for me, and I bet all of you on this call, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night knowing I had been the source of someone under my influence having a mental breakdown, or that I had contributed to a broken home or a failed marriage. But many times the conventional leader who's all about themselves, that's what you will see. There's many studies out there. I would challenge you, go look for them, but there's many studies that shows the people that's all about the power, the title, the profit. But I want to share with you 7 things about servant leaders that I've tried to model that has made my life and my leadership more meaningful. And I hope you can take some of these and apply them to your life, to your leadership, where you lead now. Number one, I believe servant leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. So let me explain that. When I was in my handler role, before I became a leader at FHI, I would see people go up to their leaders. Let's just say Tomoya has a daughter who's in gymnastics. And Tomoya goes up to his leader. He says, my daughter won the state gymnastics meet this past weekend. And the leader, that conventional leader, will say, oh, great, I don't have time for that. You know, I got to get stuff going, get the day started. I really don't have time to talk about your daughter and talk about the gymnastics meet that you went to this past weekend. And I said, you know what? He missed an opportunity. That leader missed an opportunity to touch a heart, because you have to find what touches people's heart. Most of the time, they're kids, right? Most of the time, the things that are important to them. So I said, you know what? When I become a leader, I want to do something different. So one day I had a gentleman come to me, and we was walking into the gate. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. We was going to the distribution center to get the day started. And he said, Chad, you know, I told you about my son who was playing in the AAU basketball tournament for the state championship this past weekend. I said, yeah, I remember that. Now I could have said, you know what? I got so many tasks, so many things to do to get the day started. But I said, well, tell me a little bit more about it. Man, Chad, he hit the winning shot. He took the winning shot that won the state championship for our AAU basketball team. His son was 12 years old. And I said, that is awesome, John. I said, tell me more about it. He said, man, it's in the front page of the newspaper. And I said, wow. And it had John shooting the winning shot. And at startup, I knew he liked public praise. So I said, hey, team, check this out. Before we get started today, I want to recognize John and his son. John's son hit the winning shot in the state championship AAU basketball tournament this past weekend. Look at the paper here. He's on the front page of the paper. What am I doing? I'm touching John's heart, because what's important to him? His child. But I took it a little bit further as a servant leader. I said, I can do a little more. I went home that afternoon on my ride home from work, and I picked up that newspaper. I cut out that article, and I said, great job, John, because that was his son's name too. Great job, John. Your dad is proud of you, and so are we. I put it in an envelope, addressed it to John, his son, put back then, I think a 35-cent stamp, put it in the mail, and mailed it to him. About 3 or 4 days later, John comes to work and he said, Chad, you're amazing. I said, what are you talking about? John got your letter in the mail with your little handwritten note on it. And you know what? John he was so excited, but I took an opportunity to touch his heart. He would do anything, right? I wasn't going to abuse my power, but if I needed somebody on a weekend to do some work because they had scheduled more work than we had people allotted for, and I called John, you know what John's going to do? Chad, I'll be there, because I've touched his heart before I asked for his hand. Whereas in that first scenario, I would see my boss call these people that he didn't have time for to touch their heart, where he said, I don't have time to talk about your daughter winning the gymnastics. We got to get to work. We got to get started here. Guess what happened when he picked up the phone on a busy weekend? No answer. Servant leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. The second thing is servant leaders are less focused on promotions and more focused on people, because they have discovered that relationships drive results. Relationships drive results. If I'm only communicating with my wife, or if I'm only talking to my team members, if I'm only having time for them when I need something and there's a problem, guess what? That's not going to be a good relationship. I always encourage my team members, my leaders, those that reported to me, Don't wait till you have a problem to go sit down and talk to the customer. You should be in front of them every day and build rapport. If you see a picture hanging on the wall of someone bass fishing, ask them, is that your son? Yeah, tell me a little bit more about it. And then you connect with that person. But servant leaders are less focused on promotions and more focused on people. I really believe relationships drive results. You got to get to know your people. You got to understand what drives and motivates them. It's like playing chess or checkers. Most managers want to play checkers. In the game of checkers, what happens? Every piece moves in the same direction. So leaders want to do that with their people. You need to be playing chess with your people. What's different about the chess pieces? They're all unique. They have different movements. Your people are all different. You got to sit down. You got to take time to build relationships with your people. Servant leaders are less focused on promotions and they're more focused on people. They understand that if they serve their people, the profits will follow. So if you got 10 people on your team, right, and 8 of them stop showing up for work, I don't care how good of a leader you are. You're not going to be productive and you're not going to be efficient. And a lot of times I see conventional leaders that build this rapport that, you know, they're power abusers. They're not servant leaders. They don't get the best results. They may get results, but they cannot get the best results unless they build a relationship, unless they're focused on their people. The third thing, servant leaders know their people by their name, not just their employee number. I believe as people climb the ladder of success, they lose touch with the people they're serving, but not with the servant leadership model. Remember, it's all about how many people have you been blessed to serve in your role. That's a servant leader. You remember people's names. You call them by their names. It's not just about their employee number. So as servant leaders, we got to know and be connected to our people, at least those that are closest to us. Now, if you're serving in organizations that's got thousands of people, you need to at least know those core group of people that are closest to you that you're serving. But servant leaders, they know their people by their name, not just their employee number. I also believe servant leaders hold their people accountable. They're not soft on their people. They love their people. They want their people to be successful and be significant in the world. They provide meaning to their people when they hold them accountable. I've had more people that I've held accountable and had to let go, sit there and say, Chad, I'm so sorry, but they'll call me up years later and say, the way that you led me is totally different than what I've ever seen or what I get at my current job. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about it. Well, they don't know me. I don't see anybody. I mean, you know, servant leaders hold their people accountable. They know who they are. They know them by their name. And you have to understand accountability is not a bad thing. If I let my son or daughter run out here in the street and I don't say anything to them because I'm just trying to be nice and they get run over, who's responsible for that? Me, right? So you're not soft on your people. Servant leaders hold their people accountable. They want their people to succeed. And I think the fifth thing is servant leaders put service above self. They put service above self. They see a need or a cause greater than themselves, and they commit their life to it. The sixth thing is servant leaders choose to serve. You can't be made to be a servant leader. You have to choose to lead this way. And I use this picture because these two gentlemen did not have to be made. They weren't forced to go in the military. There's no draft going on. They chose to go in the military, right? You have to choose to be a servant leader. They don't do it. You don't do it because that you have to. You do it because what? You want to. It's fulfilling. It's meaningful. And then the last thing I would say is servant leaders stoop to serve rather than stand in demand. Now, I'm a person of faith, and so I put this picture up there for two reasons. I know Greenleaf wrote it. He coined the term servant leadership, but I believe servant leadership was modeled way before Greenleaf wrote his book, and I'm glad he wrote the book. But when I read the scriptures, I read about an account where Christ was in an upper room and he was the most powerful person in the room that night. But what did he do? He didn't have the other people wash his feet. What did he do? He took off his towel. He stripped himself of his title, and he knelt and washed the feet of those who was following him. And I read a story about the current Pope when he first come to office and was the Pope of the Catholic Church. Most people in his role, most popes, they go wash the high-ranking officials' feet, but not Pope Francis. What he did was it was outside of the norm, unconventional. He said, I'm not going to wash the high-ranking officials, the leaders' feet. I'm going to the prison. He went to the prison, washed prisoners' feet, young people, and some of them were women, way outside of what was done in the past. That's a servant leader. I tell you again, the most fulfilling day of my life is when I went and washed those homeless men's feet and put socks on their feet and new shoes on their feet. But servant leaders choose to serve. And, you know, as Christ said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. And the Pope said, we should be challenged to step outside of ourselves and attend to the needs of others, those who long for a sympathetic ear, those in need of comfort or help. Servant leaders. Servant leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. Servant leaders are less focused on promotions and more focused on people. Servant leaders know their people, know them by their name, not just their employee number. Servant leaders hold their people accountable. They put service above self. They choose to serve. They stoop to serve rather than stand in demand. And in closing, servant leadership is not a lesson you learn. It's a lifestyle you live. Servant leadership is not a lesson you learn. My experiences, more than my education, has equipped me for a more meaningful and fulfilling life through servant leadership. I'm grateful of the education and all that, but my experiences in Africa, serving the orphan, serving the people at FHI, washing these men's feet who had nothing to offer me, has been more meaningful. My experiences, more than my education, seeing people succeed, helping people succeed in life. And I've been blessed to work for an organization that believes and teaches servant leadership. And when you find an organization that aligns with your purpose or your mission, life really begins to get more meaningful. The purpose, our purpose at FHI is being entrusted to serve in ways that make a memorable and measurable difference. That's our purpose at FHI. And that's what we teach. That's what we try to model. My purpose, my Kokorozashi, is that the way you say it? Kokorozashi is positively impact the lives of others through servant leadership. That's my personal goal, my personal mission. So what's your Kokorozashi? What's your personal mission? You know, Martin Luther King said a quote that just really stands out to me. He said, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't need a college degree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. I'm going to challenge all of us to step outside of our comfort zones. If you want life to be more meaningful, I hope I've given you some things that you can take with you tonight. I hope I've challenged you. I hope you'll be able to continue this journey with GLOBIS. I think, you know, Tomoya, I know you want to do more. I read your mission at GLOBIS. I'm so excited about that. But how servant leadership makes life more meaningful? You just got to get out and do it. You got to serve. You got to get outside of your comfort zone. You got to get out there, find your purpose and do it. So Tomoya, thank you for allowing me to share for a moment with your team and the group here. And I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Chad-san. Allow me to have maybe 15-20 minutes of dialogue, and then I plan to open up to the attendees. But Chad-san, allow me to start by asking you, maybe first to the audience, thank you for coming tonight. And you might have heard the word Kokorozashi for the first time. This is a Japanese word. This means a personal mission or a personal resolve. And this is kind of a centerpiece of our education at GLOBIS. And what we tell our MBA student is exactly the same with what Chad-san said. Please serve society. Getting an MBA is a privilege. Don't use your skill, your education only for yourself. Let's find meaningful ways to live our life. So that's the kind of reason why we call this seminar Kokorozashi seminar. Chad-san, my first question is, why are there so few servant leaders like you?
I think a lot of times people are very insecure. You know, a lot of insecure leaders I believe that they look at this as a weak style of leadership, like you're being pushed over when you say the word, because, you know, a lot of times servant and leader, it's almost like oxymoronic, right? I mean, servant and leader, that's not what we've been taught. It's not what you've been taught, right? But I think we lose touch with where we come from. A lot of times leaders lose touch from where they come from, and they don't want to step out of that, right? Even though a lot of times people that have leaders that are serving in that conventional way, and they say, you know what, when I become the leader, the boss or whatever, I'm never going to treat my people like that. And then they get in that position, and what do? They lose touch with their people. They lose touch with reality. They let the title get to their head. And I think there's a lot of insecure leaders that don't understand you're going to get better results through the servant leadership model. It's not a weak model. It's the model, right? And I could prove that by, again, we could look at all the different servant leaders that we know. You know servant leaders out there, right? But they're very secure in themselves. They don't worry about what other people think, because they understand the impact that they're making upon the people that they're serving. They want them to be great. They want them to be able to make society and the world a better place. So I believe it's a lot of times is people get in those positions and they lose their head. You know, it gets to their head and they lose the connection with their heart. So I think that would be some of what I would say, Tomoya.
Thank you. Let me just supplement Chad-san from my view. I have been practicing Aikido. This is a martial art for close to 40 years. I have 3 black belts and 5 dans. And as Chad-san said, you are stronger if you have gratitude for your opponent. I practice with the Japanese police, the Japanese self-defense force, so a lot of masters. But if you're trying to beat them, or if you're trying to throw them, maybe you can advance to maybe a 1st degree black belt or 2nd degree black belt, but you cannot become a 5th degree black belt or 6th degree black belt. So what Chad-san is telling us is true. You know, the more serving or the heart you have, typically you are closer to master level. That's in judo, karate, aikido, all the same. Chad-san, I think many of us find being a servant leader difficult because we don't understand the first step. Today, I think you shared with us, please start from your family. So maybe your partner, your spouse, your kids, your parents, would that be the first step?
I would agree. If you want to start on this road of servant leadership, I would say you first try to define your purpose, your mission, right? Try to define your Kokorozashi, right? Try to define that. Establish your core values. Write them down. Begin to live by them. And then, think about those things that fulfill you, those things that you put in the chat, those things that you may write down that are meaningful to you, but start in your home, start small, right? Don't start and go to Africa. Don't go to, the farthest places in the earth. Start in your home, start with your family, those that you love, those that are important to you. And how do we change the world? One person at a time, but start with the people that you're closest to. And I would say, but first I would say, find and define your purpose, your mission, establish your core values, write them down. I've had this practice in our organization. We rank order our values, right? I would say rank order your values, because then you're able to make decisions based on your values. So for instance, my values are faith, family, ministry, career, in that order. So there's nothing more important than those 4 things. They're all important. At FHI, our values are integrity, people, safety, servanthood, results, right? Those are non-negotiables. You have to have those, and you have to find your purpose. And then, yeah, start in your home. That's the best, and in your community, in your neighborhood. That's where I would start.
Thank you. One of the leaders who I used to work said, first define your purpose, write it down, and then carry it with you, maybe in your iPhone or on paper. Yeah. And what he said is only 10% of the people would actually have a personal mission, and only 10% would write it down, and only 10% would carry. So at that moment, you are 1 in 1,000. So, a true leader. So I agree with you, if you can have a personal mission, that gives you so much power.
Yeah.
Chan-san, you said that servant leadership brings results, and FHI has been an excellent company in the logistic world, but can you give us an example? It could be your company, it could be other companies that is excelling with servant leadership.
Certainly. Probably the first one that comes to my mind, other than FHI, and I can tell you, is I frequently visit this fast food restaurant. I don't know if you have them where you're at, but they're called Chick-fil-A. They serve chicken sandwiches. So they're in the same space as like Burger King, McDonald's, you name it, all the fast food places that are out there. But as I would visit Chick-fil-A, I would notice something different. The food tasted better. My experience was different. And then I said, wait a minute. Typically when you go through the drive-through of a fast food restaurant, what are you doing when you go through the drive-through? You're talking in this box. And half the time you can't hear what the other person's saying. It's so impersonal. With Chick-fil-A puts actual people out there, and you're talking to a person. So I was like, well, that's a different approach. And then when you go inside and you order, the first thing they say is, how may I serve you? And they ask for your name, right? Whereas a lot of other places I've visited in the fast food industry, they would say, what do you want to order? And then when your order's ready, what do? They shove your food across the counter and said, order number 320, right? At Chick-fil-A, they say, Tomoya. They actually bring it to your table if you're sitting in dining with them. Now, this is a fast food restaurant. So as I started doing some research and I started interviewing some people that work for this organization, I began to understand that they follow this servant leadership model. But again, I said, oh, how do you get results? Prove to me that this servant leadership stuff works, or show it to me in the numbers. So the average revenue per restaurant in the fast food business is $800,000 to $900,000 a year. The average revenue per restaurant in the fast food industry. Now, we all know the gold standard, McDonald's, right? Their revenue per restaurant is 2.8 million. Wow. So the average is 800 to 900,000. McDonald's, the gold standard, I think everywhere in the world I've ever been, there's been a McDonald's, 2.8 million. Now, one thing you got to know about Chick-fil-A, they have 52 days less opportunity to earn revenue because they're closed on Sundays. whereas all the other fast food restaurants are open.
Yeah.
The average revenue per restaurant, 800 to 900,000. The gold standard, McDonald's, 2.8 million. You know what Chick-fil-A is, Tomoya? Per restaurant, 8 million.
Really?
52 less days a year. But they do things different. They call people by their name. They create an experience. It's meaningful when you go in a restaurant. The food tastes better. You're talking to a person, a human being. Their language, how can I serve you? They're hiring from the same pool of people all these other fast food restaurants are hiring from. What are they doing differently? They teach this servant leadership model. So I would say to me, that's an example, right? Kind of like I think out there where you're at, I think you have an In-N-Out burger. One of my favorite burger places when I visit out in California, right? I believe, knowing what I've experienced going in In-N-Out burger, if I did a little more research, they probably in the fast food industry practice this servant leadership model. But they do things different. It's just a different feel when you go to Chick-fil-A. But that would be one example for me. I know for me, when I was in operations and responsible for operations, servant leadership helped me to consistently get results. And one time I told my boss, my leader, we weren't getting a monthly scorecard. You know, how are you doing with safety and revenue and turnover and all these things? But I always would have some of the best numbers. I'm not trying to be prideful. I'm just saying servant leadership, what servant leadership does, when you take care of your people, you're going to get the results. So I said, he said, we're going to start putting out scorecards. I said, I don't need a score. I know what the score is. But he said, no, Chad, you know, we got to have a score. We got to know how we're doing. I said, that's fine. I'm still going to get I'm going to get the results because I understand this servant leadership model. But I would say Chick-fil-A, 8 million revenue per restaurant compared to McDonald's at 2.8 and the average in the industry at 800 to 900,000. And they do it in 52 days less a year because they're closed on Sunday.
Thank you. We teach business, and Chick-fil-A, that could be a business case because they are 10 times the industry standard, maybe 3 times more than McDonald's. Wow.
Yeah, well, let me know. I can get you somewhere, maybe get you in to get some interviews and do a case study.
Wow, thank you. Robert Greenleaf, who wrote about servant leadership, he says because our society have a lot of institutional failure, and that's why we need to step out from our company and like yourself, work with NPOs, maybe go to Kenya. What would be your advice to the listeners today?
I would say find a cause or a need that will make the world a better place and commit to serving in whatever capacity you can to make a positive change. You know, I think about Martin Luther King. He saw a need. Things weren't right. And he did something about it, even to the point that he gave his life for it, right? He died for the cause. So I would say find a cause or a need that will make your world a better place. And you start by, what's your purpose? What bothers you? Like, I can do something about that, right? And I would say that would be my answer. Find a cause or a need that's going to make your world, your community, your space, your people, your family, whatever, or even a bigger, go out into the Kenyas, into the world, and find a way to make your world a better place, and commit to serving in whatever capacity you can. I'm not a doctor, so when we go to Kenya, I'm not the one seeing the patient, but you know what I'm doing? I'm loving on the people. I'm feeding the people. I'm taking, and just what's wrong? I got a headache. Okay, so I pass that off to the doctor. So do whatever you can. We can all do something.
Thank you. And what I understood from your speech and this dialogue is start somewhere, but action will kind of give you fulfillment to generate kind of the next action. one of my friend who had served from disaster relief in Japan after the 3/11, the big earthquake.
Yes.
He has been going to Tohoku, and he said, Nakamura, the 7th time and the 8th time was kind of like a change point for him. Until the 7th time, you know, he thought it was awkward to be in Tohoku serving the people. But from the 8th time, he said something clicked within himself. And it became natural. You know, he was tied with the region, with the people. And, you know, every weekend he was in Tohoku. So,
well, a great
probably
point, and I'll add to that, Tomoya, is I didn't start by going to Africa. I started by going to my neighborhood, to my city, right? And then I went to New York, the South Bronx, the second poorest congressional district in America. And I served with, you know, a local church there, World Vision, just serving kids that were running the streets, that had no hope. You just brought that, you know, so I didn't just start by going to Africa, and then it just continued to grow. I went to Panama and served the Kuna Indians off the coast of Panama. And then I went to Africa. But you have to start, you have to, and all of us, all of you on this call can do that. You have it in you, or you wouldn't be on here tonight, spending your night hearing about servant leadership, right? So I believe in you. But I would just add that, that's a great point.